collected and how it is stored. So Rich Associates um, has put on the seminar trying to raise awareness um, in the church community in regards to what is happening and how do we respond appropriately. It is said, sons of Issachar in Chronicles understood the times and knew what needed to be done. And as a kingdom citizen, a pastor, elder at Fellowship Tabernacle, under the leadership of Reverend Al Miller, we saw it fit that we should do this because we believe this is very important in terms of the church and what happens. In coming to this seminar, in December last year, November, December last year, I met upon a man of God, Nicholas Foster, who is Jamaican, but has migrated to the UK, where he now lives and is registered as a barrister, but he's also trained in data protection. He's a man of God. And he says, how can we help the church community to properly prepare? Now, even though the law came in effect on December 1, 2023, the government has given to us a 6 months grace period, not only for church, but for everybody to come up to par with what is happening. On May 31, that grace period is no longer in effect. And there are some penalties that come as a result. But we are building awareness. We are preparing the church community. We are preparing the NGO community in terms of how do we best go about dealing with this. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Nicholas just to, again, introduce himself. He's our main presenter, and we will proceed in terms of the presentation for this morning. You can hold your questions or you can type them in the chat, and at an appropriate time, we'll respond. But remember, you here, but then you have to now become an evangelist in terms of bringing the rest of the church community up to speed and to see what it is we are going to do in order to properly ensure that our community is properly taken care of. We have deliberately not charged, but you can make a donation to offset the expenses. If you go into the Spur community, there's a donation place there, and we invite persons just to give. We call it a free will offering. As church people, you understand that. So as you have so led, you can go about and do that. Go over to you, Nicholas.
Thank you, Pastor Percy. Good morning, everyone. It is indeed my pleasure to be with you here virtually. This is the third such session that we are delivering. First one was in Kingston, and that was well attended, very interactive. We received some really positive feedback from that session. The second one was in Mandeville. That also was a really positive session that we had. And this is the final session, well, at least for this week, because it looks like we'll have to make this a regular feature over the next few weeks and potentially months, because data protection compliance, just let me say this at the outset, is not an event. So it doesn't mean that from the 1st of June, whatever activities you decide to take, then you'll tick the box and, that's it. We move on. Data protection is an ongoing compliance process. So just like security of our homes and our property, you review, you update, and you learn, and you sort of get better as you go. Okay, so just remind me, Pastor Percy, how long do we have for this morning session?
About an hour.
Okay. Okay, an hour. Right. So my background, as I said, is qualified barrister in the UK, attorney at law in Jamaica, but we've got two different types of lawyers in the UK, solicitors and barristers. I've also acquired information, my master's in information rights law and practice, including the Data Protection Act and GDPR, as in the General Data Protection Regulations, which is across Europe. And as you will learn from subsequent slides, is that the Data Protection Act is actually modeled on UK primarily data protection laws and elements of the GDPR. I work also part-time as an associate instructor with the London School of Economics, and also have obtained over 15 years of experience in this field and working for one of the largest
Nicholas, you have to speak a bit louder.
pro,
We're
pro,
not hearing you.
working for one of the largest provider of healthcare and education services across Europe, with over 110 legal entities and over 10,000 employees. So just to reassure you that I approach data protection not from a theoretical perspective. In other words, here is the legislation, this is what section 1, subsection 1 says, and we move on. I take a practical approach, hands-on approach in dealing with real life situations and also different scenarios which the church and other organizations would likely to face from this act. So why are we spending this time, and also dedicating so much time to talk about data protection? And that's because in our own lives, let's just think for a second how we engage and transact with financial institution, with the government, with marketing companies, etc. Most of this is done virtually online. So it means that the way in which we use data and our own information is shared in this information age, there are also other challenges or risk where that information is more susceptible to cyber theft and other forms of inappropriate criminal behavior. But also that information easily can be accessed in an unauthorized manner. So for example, in the church, if information is stored on a computer, that computer is not password protected, or that computer is lost, or a mobile phone is lost with photographs of someone, that information is easily accessible and obviously could cause harm and distress or embarrassment, or even worse, to individuals to whom that information belong. So, and also they must stress that the Act also applies to information that is stored on paper, not just digital information. So the Act is around fostering trust between consumer and the market, between government and citizen. In other words, our data, my name, your TRN, your passport details, your medical information, your employment history, your religious information, all of that information is private and should be protected, at all cost. And if that information is protected, is not protected, then obviously there would be penalties for doing so. And so it means also that the Act gives us control over our data. So in other words, governments or the market or a bank or an employer shouldn't ask for information just because they can. Really the question should be, why do you need this information? What is the purpose? And I'll go through some of the data protection principles or standards shortly. So in 2016, big conversations started around data protection across the world. And this, originated in Europe, in the European Union, where this general data protection regulation was passed by the European Parliament and Commission. And this became law across Europe in 2018 on the 25th of May. Since that time, over 137 countries across the world have implemented some form of data protection legislation. So India, China, Russia, Nigeria, Brazil, states within America, and also in 2019, closer to home, Barbados implemented their data protection law. And in July 2020, Jamaica government introduced the Data Protection Act of 2020. That law, as Pastor Percy said, came into effect on the 1st of December last year. And that's 2 years after the transition period where the Information Commissioner was appointed on the 1st of December 2021. Now, we are in this 6-month grace period, where the government recognized in December last year that lots of businesses and organizations were not yet up to speed and in full compliance with the law. So the government allowed more time for organization to prepare. And I'll go through some of those key, if you like, essential action points in terms of what does preparation look like so that we don't squander this period, but at least we start to take action to ensure that we get up to speed. And as I said, compliance is a journey, it's a process, but at least the church, we should have at least start to engage. And for those of you who've attended this session, that is part of the engagement. Let's spread the message with our colleagues across the church, different denomination, so that the more we talk about data protection, the more we talk about our responsibilities, it means that we develop a culture of compliance rather than a legislative, mandate from the government. So the Data Protection Act, I have summarized, I think, most of this slide in the earlier opening remarks. It's around protecting us, protecting our security, etc. So personal data, should there be any doubt, and of course this is recorded so others will be able to understand. Personal data is any information relating to a living person or a deceased person who died less than 30 years prior. Any information relating to that person or persons who can be identified from that information. So if you expand this further, it means, as I've said, someone's name, but also a name may not be the only means of identifying someone. So just describing someone's voice or the fingerprint information or someone's height or someone's behavior or someone's characteristics or someone's preferences, someone's religious views or philosophical views, someone's, in terms of their sexual life, or criminal offenses, you see. So any information that could identify a particular person where that person is distinguished from another person, that information is covered and is caught by the Data Protection Act. So identification that is direct, as in looking at a photo or a CCTV of someone, or if someone would have an unusual name, notice that'd be easy to identify them directly. But if not, then any indirect form of identification, that information applies to a person, and that information could either be spoken or recorded. So the expression of opinion is also someone's personal data. So if you, for example, in the church were to have it recorded where you are planning to ordain or promote, you know, a member to an office or demote or dismiss someone from an office, that is either an expression of opinion or an indication of intentions towards that person. So it means that if that information is written down, then that's their personal data, which should be protected by this law. So there are different types of sensitive personal data. Some types of data would be more sensitive than others. So someone's name or TRN number, etc., is personal data, but is not sensitive personal data. But sensitive personal data would be those examples which are listed there. Someone's, health information, mental or physical health, criminal offenses, political opinions or views, association affiliation, trade union membership, etc. Those are sensitive. So what this means is that with sensitive personal data, more caution should be taken before collecting, before receiving, before asking for it. But also, once you have it, then also a greater degree of safeguard and should be given to protect that information from any unauthorized access, from any damage, from any loss or defacement, etc., of that information, because that information is sensitive personal data. So how do we protect information? It's really about taking a risk-based approach. So in other words, your most prized possession in your homes, you would take more precaution to protect that than you would information that you wouldn't really mind if a vase or is broken or damaged, etc. But obviously, what is more important to you, you would try to protect that more. And that's the same with sensitive personal data. You would ensure that this information is locked away, for example, in a filing cabinet. And also the keys not just left open for anyone to see and to use to access the cabinet. And also the keys is maybe a copy is given to another person who is authorized to access and to view the information. And if that information is removed from the cabinet, you would know because there's an audit trail in place because only two key holders, and obviously maybe there's a book to sign in and sign out information when it's taken. If information is stored digitally to ensure that also is password protected and also liaise with your IT person or company to ensure that laptop is also encrypted. So should that laptop be lost or stolen, then of course that information would be even more difficult to access should anyone log into that laptop. So it's a risk analysis. The data protection, really, there are some key themes, risk mitigation. So in other words, what risk, what harm could ensue should this information be accessed or lost or stolen? What harm could be there for the individual to whom that information belongs? Or to the church? What are the implications? So you would risk assess and protect that information accordingly. But also there's the issue of proportionality, right? So you wouldn't take a one size fit all approach. You would take action and invest more money in protecting the most sensitive information that would cause the most harm. And also it's the same approach that one would take as you develop an action plan to ensure you comply with the Data Protection Act. You know, in what areas would the church or your church be most at risk? Because every church wouldn't necessarily be starting on the same level. Some church have got really robust systems already in place to protect data. So therefore, okay, where are you most at risk? And how can you build an unexisting good practice? And also you may wish to across the church community to have these discussions across locations, across denominations, to share best practice and also develop, you know, good practice and principles as you go. So there are some key definitions from the legislation. I will the session that we had on Monday, we had 38 slides. I won't be going through all 38 slides. You will see me skip certain slides to focus on the sort of most salient points so that we can complete the session within the hour. So a data controller is referred to as the organization or the person who takes decisions as to whether or not to collect information about persons and what to do with that information. So the church is a data controller because the church is made, or someone in the church, the leadership, would have made that decision to collect information about visitors on a visitor card, about its members. There's a membership form or there's a membership list about, other individuals. A church would have been registered as to be able to conduct marriages or funerals, etc. So the church is a data controller by virtue of taking those decisions to collect and to use information about persons. A data processor would be a person or an entity other than a member of the church who would be charged with the responsibilities of handling data on behalf of the church. So, for example, if you were to outsource your IT functions to another company, that the IT company would be accessing personal data if it's the membership of the church. So that IT company would be a data processor. So any person who would access information that's within the control of the church, under a contract, etc., would be a data processor. And of course, we're all data subjects. Processing is any act. This is not an IT terminology where there's an electronic digital processing happening. Processing is any activity that is taken in relation to personal data. So collecting, using, storing, transferring from one location to another, transmitting via email, deleting, amending, any activity that is carried out in relation to personal data is a form of processing. So the church would collect information about persons during worship services, during baptisms, christening, wedding, funeral, counseling, charity events, and also when requesting donations. Again, the donor is a data is a data subject because information is collected about that person. Could be their name, first name, last name, maybe email address, location, their financial status, etc. That information has been captured in these different formats and areas. As you can see there, information will be collected about people, about members or visitors on a visitor's card, on a prior request form, marriage certificate, death certificate, meeting minutes, baptism certificate, christening certificate. As I've mentioned, donation documentation and information will be stored in a laptop or maybe in a camera or a phone. Information is also collected via CCTV, a video platform. I mean, on this platform, for example, those who've registered to attend this virtual event, that is, a process of collecting information about persons. Tithes and offering again, information is collected about individuals. So why should the church take this legislation seriously? But even legislation aside, why should the church, you know, make efforts to protect personal data about its members and about visitors, about members of the community? And that's because you go back to the story that Jesus told of the Good Samaritan, where that's been sort of extrapolated into the legal context to mean the neighborhood principle, you know, where everyone is potentially a neighbor, not just the person who lives next door to us. And we have a duty of care, you know, to all of humanity, to all of those who would come into contact with, to protect and not to actively carry out any action or actions that would harm someone. And where we can, to take actions to prevent harm from others. And that is, if you like, to sum up the whole essence of Christianity and of the gospel in loving thy neighbor as thyself. So really, the church would want to, and as I said, lots of churches do, take action to protect information of the most vulnerable, of people who come to us for solace and for refuge. So the church should be a safe place and a safe space so that information that is shared during counseling, mental health, challenges, or other very private confessional information that is imparted, during that of context and relationship of trust, that we take action to prevent harm to that individual from any misuse or mishandling or unauthorized access of that information. So aside from the law, this is what we would want to do. So the Data Protection Act brings this into the forefront and acts as a reminder to say, well, if the contact details of a person fleeing domestic violence is this shared with the church and disclosed accidentally or via gossip or whatever, any reckless behavior, that person could be harmed because their location it could be revealed. They could suffer physical or other emotional harm or distress. If confidential information is revealed during confession, is shared verbally, again, you will probably lose a church member. And that again would undermine the very mission of the church and also damages the church's reputation in the community. If membership list is accessed during a burglary, again, individuals could be subjected to identity theft or other forms of inappropriate nuisance calls or contacts, etc. So there are actually real risk to individuals. This is not just a law that's on paper. In theory, there are actually, and I could, if I had more time, to give you real examples of where data has been disclosed deliberately or accidentally, which cause harm, real harm to individuals. And given the context, the world that we live in, this is actually a real risk. Video image of someone who attends the church, again, is shared, via YouTube. We now record, live stream lots of our services. So what conversation should we start to have amongst ourselves in terms of how we carry out our religious functions and mission, but at the same time protecting personal information and personal data. You know, those are conversations that should start to take place. And the Data Protection Act is not intended to impede, to stop, or prevent any of the activities of the church. So just to make that clear for anyone who may be concerned. So this is not there to undermine or to stop any of the church's function going forward. This is about ensuring that we have a framework in place to ensure that our activities are carried out in a transparent, professional, and safe manner, you know, whilst protecting the sort of information of individuals. So I'm going to focus now on some of the key action points. Then I'll focus on the data protection standards and open the floor for questions. And we can always pick up on other points as we go. So some of the key compliance requirements of the Act are these. Registration with the Office of the Information Commissioner. And that is straightforward. I mean, you go to the Information Commissioner's website, OIC, and you will be able to create an account there for when the sort of application process is open or is live. You can start to register your church or your church organization as a data controller. And just to clarify again, for those who may be affiliated to a larger organization, is that it's the head office. So you don't need to register every church who is part of the same denomination or the same branch, beg your pardon. You know, it's the main office where it's decision-making body that should be registered. Yearly, a data protection impact assessment should be completed, and that's a risk assessment for any data that is held and used by the church. A data protection officer would need to be appointed for most church organizations. Again, as I said, not for individual churches. This could be a person or a company. For example, our company acts as data protection officer for different organizations, and the Information Commissioner made it clear that a data protection officer doesn't have to be exclusively belonging to a particular organization. So it could be an employee for those who are part of organizations where you have employees, but it could be a member of the church, but also that function could be outsourced to another company. So a data protection officer in most cases for lots of churches would need to be appointed because of the size of certain church membership, and this is the amount of data that is collected across sometimes different parishes and regions, and also the nature of data. Comply with the data protection standards and the rights of data subjects. So as I said, I will focus now on the data protection standards or data protection principles, and which are these. Information about individuals should be used and collected in a fair and lawful manner. So if, for example, you have information that's revealed to you by a member or visitor, and that information highlights that another person could be at risk of harm, then the law says you should share that information with relevant law enforcement agencies. So you would need consent to share that. So you would share that information. So you're acting lawfully. Yeah. But also there's an element of fairness. So because you can share information, sometimes so you need to think about what is fair. So we had a discussion this week about counseling, for example. So if you, at the start of the counseling session, you would say to the individual, if you reveal information to me where a child, could be at harm, at risk, or you could be, on the verge of taking your own life, I cannot keep that information confidential. So fairness really would indicate that someone, you share that, you tell them, you inform them, let them know exactly what you would do. So it's about how would you expect to be treated? It's about treating others fairly, fairly and lawfully. Purpose limitation means that information should only be collected for a specific purpose. So if you're collecting information for counseling, that's what it is collected for. You cannot start sending requests to that person for donations, to support a cause. That's not the purpose of it. So the information shouldn't be collected just because you can, or just because it may be needed at a later date. The information must be collected for a specific purpose and used for that purpose or any compatible purposes, right? So if someone is a member of the church, then you engage with them. Obviously, you can share with contact them again for support, etc., within the same context. But that information can't be then sent to a marketing company, for example. Data minimization means that, you should only ask for the very, very minimum information that you need to fulfill your purpose, rather than asking for, more than is needed. So, persons may recall completing, for example, questionnaires, where information may be asked about your feedback on a particular activity, or service or product, where they're asking for information that is a bit extra. Why do you need to know your, I don't know, someone's, for example, sexuality if all you need is to give feedback on a service, you see? So it's about minimum information. Also, the very minimum information that is collected, it means your job is easier, because the more you have, is the more money you need to spend to protect it, you see? So ask and only use the very minimum. Information should be accurate and kept up to date at all times. Information should not be kept indefinitely. Information shouldn't be just held on a computer or filing system because you have it and just couldn't be bothered to go through a sort of review process and to sort of sift through and get rid of what you don't need. So information should only be kept for a specific period, as long as is necessary to fulfill your original purpose or purposes. Unless the law says keep X information for 7 years, you know, information should only be kept for as long as is necessary for your purpose. There are a range of rights that individuals have. If there is time at the end, we can touch upon some of those. The church should have in place at least someone to be that sort of champion of data protection, so that in case you receive any requests or correspondence from anyone seeking to exercise their rights, you are at least aware of those requests and how to register or to log those requests and to track those requests to ensure that they are handled and responded to within the appropriate time frame. Data security, I've spent a lot of time speaking about that. So it really means about keeping it safe at all times. And if transferred to an international body or country, ensure that the receiving person or organization has robust systems in place to protect that data. Lastly, there are, if you like, significant, there's a list of penalties for failing to comply with the Data Protection Act. So I've mentioned cyber threats, data breaches, damage to the church's reputation, and
Um,
standing in the
Nicholas,
community. Yes,
Nicholas,
Pastor, yes?
can you just go back to the liability What are the risks? Yes, that's
Yes,
important.
risk. Yes,
What
so
are the
risk,
risks?
risk, right. So
Yeah.
we'll end on this slide and open for questions. So what are the risks to the church and its offices? So I've mentioned cyber threats, data breaches, because obviously if you don't know what you should do to protect this information, it's very easy for a data breach incident to happen. Damage to the church's reputation, loss of revenue or reduction of its revenue or from donors, etc. You know, as a result, because if the church is not seen as an organization that takes information protection and safeguarding, really, that's a catch-all phrase. It's a safeguarding function. Then obviously it's unlikely that others would want to support the church's mission. Financial penalties, and I'll tell you what those are. Civil suits. So in other words, you could be sued by individuals should they suffer damage or distress for because of your lack of security in protecting their information. And officers of the church, as in the bishop, minister, evangelist, could be sent to prison. Those who are responsible for the officials of the church could be held personally liable. The church could be fined up to 4% of its worldwide its revenue or the amount of money that it has in its coffers for any data breach incident. And as you can see there, so for example, for failing to register with the Office of the Information Commissioner, it's a fine of $1 million. For continuing to collect information about people without registering, it's a fine of 2 million. And also individual officers or those who are responsible who turned a blind eye or through consent, connivance, or neglect, or acquiescence, or recklessness could be sent to prison. So, didn't mean to end on that such a such an negative point, but is actually the reality. So now we'll open for questions.
Before we open for questions, Nicholas, so in the law, there's a data subject, the data processor, and the data controller, right?
That's
Those are
correct.
the three key things that we need to know to make note of.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything in summary that you'd suggest for our audience? Yes.
Well, I would say don't be, it may sound scary, and I hope I didn't make it daunting or alarming. It's the same approach that you'd want to take with your own information and your family's information. And as I said, lots of churches have good practices in place already. So let's think about having this conversation. Today's not the end of the conversation, it's the beginning. Think about going back to your church, location and have the conversation, you know, have them set aside a meeting just to discuss safeguarding of information, you know. Use that word terminology if it means that the message is communicated and be more applicable, um, palatable, sorry, to people. So develop an action plan, you know, in terms of, okay, you cannot do everything at the same time, be pragmatic. What exactly is the most important action to take as a church? Where do you think you are likely to be at risk? And let's have those conversations.
The first thing would be to register. And I'm glad you made the distinction between the individual church and a group of churches. There are a lot of independent churches. I know that there's just one branch, so they would have to register. Versus like with the Baptists, they have a organizational or the New Testament or the Methodist. So what I'm hearing you saying, Nicholas, is that for those organizations, it is just the head office that has to register. But beyond registering, what they need to be doing is to be ensuring that the individual branches are doing risk, is following a set procedure, like the risk analysis that they need to do. Is that what you're suggesting?
Absolutely. It's no different to the existing um, organizational management structure of
Mhm,
the church, of the organization. You know, in the same way where the head office would develop, I don't know, a doctrinal theory
mhm.
or
Statement
your
of faith.
approach. Exactly. You would expect that to be cascaded down to
Right.
across every location. It's the same approach. You know, you develop a policy, you'd expect the same principles to be applied and implemented across the wider organization. You know, it's the same approach where you'll have, you know, an evangelist who's a, I don't know, a youth leader who would connect with them sort of main, you know, president of the head
Mhm.
office. It's the same approach that we would apply. Let's use those structures to implement and to promote these data protection principles.
All right, so we've opened the lines. If there's any, what you do is just indicate with your hand if you want to make a comment or ask a question, because this is the time for that. All right, so any comments just coming off the information that is shared, just to let you know, the full presentation by Nicholas will be emailed to each person who have registered because would have picked that up. So would have sent out the full PowerPoint presentation to you. The other thing too is just for persons to note we're in the chat that Nicholas offers this service in terms of your church. If you need additional help to do a risk analysis or consulting, that's one of the things that he does because he has an office here in Jamaica. Even though he is Jamaican British, he comes from a deep rural district in Saint, and that's called Alva. That's, I have it right, right? Not Avla.
That's correct.
And
So
that's correct. So
Avla is Alva spelled backwards. Yeah.
right, that's correct. So it's available and it is there. That can be sent if a church needs to um invite him to come. Yeah, somebody is asking us, please send Nicholas contact. You want to type that into the chat,
Sure, I'll
Nicholas?
do
I
that.
could
I'll do
do
that
that
straight
for
away.
you.
I'll do that straight away.
Right. And so that's important. And then we're gonna put in the chat the 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 website for the information commissioner, which is up and going. If you have that, because you could type that in the chat too, you know?
Sure, I'll do that as well.
Yes, so that people know that's the first thing, because the 31st of May is the cutoff point for registration. And um, right. So that's Nicholas and then the information commissioner, right? Mhm. You have that, Nick, or do I have to search that for you?
I'll
Information
I'll
commi.
I'll get that up shortly. Let's take the questions in the meantime
All right,
while
let's so that
I
somebody said
have
an
a look for
excellent
the.
presentation.
Oh, thank you. That's just an abridged version.
Yes, a bridge version, but we know
Yeah,
that people are things, so we never wanted to go into it. There are some interesting questions that were asked. Okay. Um, any questions in the chat, or you can open your mic and ask a question if you need to ask it. Um, yes. It was clear as mud it would seem in terms of the presentation and people understanding. What we're trying to do is to build awareness so people can become compliant in terms of what is needed as we continue to move through all the different things that are happening. And just to say to persons who've heard about the NITS, this data protection is a companion built to the NITS. I believe it is very important, yes. So that is in the office. of the Information Commissioner. It's in the chat, so you can go there and at least register your church or your group of churches, so you begin to take action, so you're not left in the cold or be at risk in terms of what needs to happen. Yes. All right. No questions? No questions?
It's for free, guys. There isn't a cost.
Oh, Mark, go ahead, Mark. Mark. Go ahead, Mark. Reverend.
Okay. Since Mark is not in, can you hear me, sir?
Good morning.
Richard Keene, Family Church on the Rock.
Okay, Pastor Richard, go ahead. Apostle Richard, how are you?
You did say that the points would be emailed to us.
The PowerPoint, yes, it would be. Right, that's correct.
And therefore, the information as to the offices that we need to get in touch with also be in that document, right?
It's not, that's how I put it in the chat. But his Nicholas information is on the PowerPoint, but the Office of Information Commissioner is just OCI, Office Information Commissioner.gov.gm. That's what it is, right, Nicholas?
It is correct. In fact, if you click on that link, it will take you to the website. Yeah, anyone. Or copy paste it into your own browser, because this chat will be closed eventually.
Right, okay.
There was a thank you. There's a question in the chat.
From yes.
Yes.
Good day, Mr. Foster. Thank you for your simplified presentation. As an attorney in the UK, can you explain to us, attorneys in Jamaica, how would you and your firm pivot with protection of clients' data, and who must comply with the regulations and share information with the paralegals and bearers?
Right. So my interpretation of this question is that you're saying you've got an obligation to share this information. So therefore, how do you comply whilst doing so? So as I said, under the data protection standards or principles, providing you've got a lawful obligation or ground or basis for sharing and using information, the Data Protection Act does not stop you from doing so. What it does, however, expect is that any sharing of information is done in a secure manner. So, for example, if information is given to a bearer on paper, then therefore, what type of envelope is that information contained within? Can it be open easily for the bearer to access and to read that information, in transit? What if that information was to be lost? What if that bearer, I don't know, God forbid, knocked over, on their bike, that information is scattered in the street, So think about literally practical scenarios and what could happen to personal data when it is given to a person and when it's been moved from one location to another.
And thank you.
That's a good way to segue into
question.
my question.
All right, one sec. So, Stacia, has he answered your question, Stacia?
He did. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you.
Yeah.
Because what obtains in Jamaica is, say, for instance, a sale transaction. Oftentimes, what will happen is that we'll complete the form for the stamp office. The vendors and the purchasers' TRN numbers are affixed on that document. So is the attorneys, and it will be given to the bearer with the check to take to the stamp office for filing. And oftentimes he will await the document being stamped or come back later with the documentation. It's not a practice to put it in on a sealed envelope. But even if it's on a sealed envelope, again, person's address and telephone numbers are often placed on the outside of an envelope. The information is given to the paralegal as well to put in an agreement for sale. So oftentimes it's all the responsibility with respect to clients' data is not does not reside in the attorney solely. And I think this is very onerous.
Right. I agree. So for example, with the bearer, you know,
Yes,
so the bearer is actually acting, if you're the attorney, you're the data controller, you
yes,
hire or engage the bearer, that's
yes.
your data processor, right?
Okay,
So what the law says, you should have a contract in place with your data processor. And the
okay,
contract should cover certain, elements, such as the security. Yeah.
okay,
So the same kind of security that you would practice, you'd
yes,
expect the bearer to also be mindful and to sort of sign up to that security. You see,
gotcha.
so that's how it works. So we're not saying that no one else can see information apart
Right.
from you. It's about unauthorized access.
Okay,
Yeah. So your paralegal, again, of course, they need to see information. But when you recruit them, what is your onboarding process? What is within the employment contract? If you're part of a wider firm where you share the same paralegal, again, what discussion do you have within your firm with other attorneys? You see, so it's about this clearance and screening process that you would go through in hiring someone to work for you, you know, because you can never have 100% security, even in our homes, but we can take precaution, you know, in based on what and on what could happen.
gotcha. Thank you so
You,
much.
you're welcome.
That's Reverend Mark. You were next.
Yes, I've been responding from the first call. I want to acknowledge the presenter and to say, boy, really a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for it.
You're
And I look
welcome.
forward to receiving the slides. I wish you had more time to present it all, because I'm left now very, very hungry for more. My question is in relation
Just
to...
before, we can always arrange other
Yes,
sessions,
man,
you
We can
know.
do
absolutely.
the other
That's one of
session.
the reasons why I asked for your contact, because we're
Okay.
certainly going to make that arrangement.
Yeah.
But my question is in relation to, it was very, very significant that you mentioned those who are in leadership positions within the individual churches, and those are the persons who would be held accountable. Just paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Now, if it is that the pastor puts the necessary things in place, necessary framework in place to protect the data, by whatever means that data came into the church, but having given the instructions and putting things in place, and it probably is in writing as well, and signage is there to indicate who should not do what, as the case might be. Yet still an individual breaches that. They may not have signed, because that last response that you gave was a nice way to segue into it. They may not have signed within the context of the church, the individual church.
Yeah.
But they went ahead and breached those protocols that would have been established. What happens in that case?
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. The question that we had sometime last week on another session, because the difference between the church, where it's about voluntary sort of people signing up to certain principles and codes of conduct, right? So it's not like an employer where you can fire someone, and
You can
have
let
them.
go of volunteers, boss. You can.
You can
You can, of course.
you can, and so you can excommunicate a
Not
member.
excommunicate. You just ask them not to do that
Ask them,
function
okay,
anymore.
not to do it anymore. Okay, right. So really, the act is very practical, and also one of the principles around pragmatism and proportionality. So once you have done your part, in other words, you've taken all the precautions that it was humanly possible to take, and you could foresee. So in other words, this session is part of that awareness. you have your training with relevant officers who are responsible for handling data, and also those who handle the most sensitive data also receive specific training. You've got your awareness to your membership, and like you've said, signage. If someone nevertheless would flagrantly abuse, the law and all of that, then you wouldn't be responsible. The information commissioner, as part of your investigation, would consider your actions to be mitigating features, in dealing with that matter, you see. And so that in terms, that's the response. Is about do what you can do. As I said, there's never 100% security, but also make it clear in terms of your awareness to members that if they individually take upon themselves to breach the law, right? In disregard of whatever policies that you have in place, they themselves will be held criminally responsible.
Thank you
I
so
think
much for
that
that response.
I think that any more? I think there was a question before it, and it was this that we were saying, and so by May 31st is the deadline to get on board, and should we sign on to oci.gov.jm and register? That's what you need to do, right, Nicholas?
Absolutely. In the meantime, create an account, and when the portal becomes open for your application for registration, that'll be very easy for you to do. Yeah.
All right.
All right, just to be fine-tuned, correct? It's OIC.
OIC, yeah. It's in the chat.
oic.gov.jm. They put the HTTPS for the web page, and then Office of Information Commissioner .government.jm. So what we're saying to individuals, as you come off the chat today, if you are responsible for the organization, go and register. And then when it becomes open, you can do the other things that they request for you to do. All right?
Yeah.
Any further questions?
Yeah. But can I just clarify what you may be thinking about questions, anyone? What you also may wish to start doing is preparatory actions for your registration application is to think about, you may have this already, but if you haven't, what type of information do you handle, do you collect, do you use? Yeah. Is it just name, email address, etc., location? Do you have other type of information, medical, mental health, blah, 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 what? And sort of started to list these. So as I said, you can have a meeting, just to brainstorm and to think about these things. Okay, what type is, because this will be needed for your registration submission eventually. Where is it stored? Who has access to it? you know so start thinking about, do you share information overseas, etc. So start thinking about, these factors.
That's important. Right. So I think um are there any more comments or questions? Has it been good for you, having spent the last hour just listening in and learning? You can type in the chat what just a quick response to this awareness building, because this probably be the first. I got a call from somebody in education to say, can you do it for us in the West, because there are a lot of persons who are collecting information and not understanding that the Data Protection Act of 2020 covers them. So if you are in an NGO, if you are in a school, if you're in a PTA, if you're a sole trader, all of those things, if you're in business, we were leveraging it towards the church. We're just saying that it is upon us. It's not going away. It's not going away. And so we need to put in the necessary safeguards so that we are protecting ourselves, but protecting also the persons whose data we collect. Right, so that's it. And as I said, we've done this when I conceived of doing this seminar. I said I was gonna charge, and as the Lord said to me, no, don't charge. We are sowing this into the kingdom. And so we accept, as we said, free will offerings. You can go to spur.com to the donation page and donate as you feel led. But the presentation will be emailed to you. The full presentation will be emailed to you by the end of the day. We'll just pass on because you'd have registered. And so we picked up your email so we can send the full presentation to you. So you'll have the 38-page presentation. Yes. We're taking the comments also. And just that you know, we were live on Love TV. There's a YouTube channel that was created that you can go back and review what was said. And then we're gonna be doing some further editing, so we do the full presentation. And you'll get some of the questions that were asked on Monday, which was very good in terms of what people had to say. All right. Any further thing before we close, Nicholas?
I think we've covered a lot. You've got my contact details. Feel free to call, WhatsApp, or email. There's also an Instagram page. I've got a website, in fact, I'll put it in the chat as well. Feel free to go to the website, go to the Instagram page as well to be up to date, constantly up to date with information.
Yeah. And I'm putting an email address for myself here in the chat. So if people want to be in touch with me, you have my number. It was on the flyer. You can call me also in terms of further follow-up. All right. All right. Okay. Thank you very much for joining us on this Reach Associates and Avla Business Services Awareness Building Seminar today. Thank you for joining us. Looking forward to hearing from you as we seek to become compliant with the Data Protection Act of 2020. Thank you for joining us as
Thank
we
you
close our
also.
for
We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
All right.
Yes.
Bye.